All right, today I want to talk about linking prototype objects and how to build a prototype chain. So what a prototype is, how it's connected to objects, how you can get to all of these methods that exist inside prototypes that are nested way deep in the prototype chain. Okay, now we have here a function called otherProto. This function is going to be used as a constructor function. So it's a function that will build other objects. Inside of the function, you can see we're using the keyword this here. And that's a good sign that this is a constructor function. Whenever we use the keyword this, we're talking about the instance. So we call new and then the function name. When you do that, it runs this constructor function and it builds an object for you. I don't have to put the keyword return here. It automatically returns the instance of the object. Now, after we have this function defined, we can, on that function, say its prototype is going to get some method. So we are adding a method into the prototype object. The function is the constructor. A constructor function automatically gets a prototype object. And we're creating some method inside of that object. So you can think of it like this. We have down here, this is our instance, obj, we're calling new proto. So there's an object inside of ob. It will have as its prototype otherProto. Now otherProto is in itself an object. This function is an object. In JavaScript, functions aren't special things. Well, they are special things, but they are considered to be just another object. So when you create a function, what you're really doing behind the scenes is calling new object, and then it's an object of type function. So this is going to be going up to the object prototype. And then that points to null. So as you go all the way up the prototype chain, at the very top of it is always null. Now object, this is the one that we get when we call new object. This is the function that we're running. OtherProto is a function that we're running. So it has a prototype, and its prototype points to object prototype. And then we have our instance, which is using otherProto as its constructor function, as its prototype. So we've got, this is the chain that we're working with here. Object points to otherProto.prototype, which points to Object.prototype, which points to null. So when we call this, when we say new is equal to otherProto, we have created an object, and this object has everything that's attached to this. So we can say Object.prop1. That's going to exist there. That's not a problem. We can console log that out if we want. That will give us the 456. And that property exists inside of obj. So directly inside here, inside that. This method here, inner, also is being placed inside of here because we put this in front of it. So we can call obj.inner. And that's going to work. That's going to write out this inner method. So let's open up our console here and we'll run that just to see those things. There's the 456. I'll scroll this up. Here's the 456 and then inner. Okay, great. Now, some method exists inside the otherProto.prototype. Inside this part right here. That's where some method exists. But because it's on the prototype chain, I am allowed to use it. I can call some method like that. This is otherProto. That's the message that we had right here. Okay, great. So we've got this instance which has its own property1 and inner method. It can also use the things that are up on its prototype chain. And object prototype has things like toString. And that's why we can do this, toString. That's going to work. We're not going to get an error there. No errors, because the toString method exists on this prototype chain. inside of object prototype, there is a toString method. That's why we can do that. Now, this one here, inner, because we put this in front of it, it means that the inner method exists inside of obj. That's why we could do this. But it doesn't exist inside of other proto, even though we wrote it here. Because of this, it exists inside of obj. If I tried to do obj dot and then get its prototype, so we can do underscore underscore proto, that will get me the prototype of this object, and try to call some method, that's going to crash. That is not going to work. Oh, sorry. Of course it's going to work. We've got that there. Inner, this is the one that I was trying to use. You probably caught that long before I did. There's the one crashing. So inner is not on the prototype chain. Inner only exists inside of obj. Now this double underscore proto, this is a special property, and I put it up in the comments here. Proto belongs to any object, so an instance of an object, of any kind of object. There is a proto property. This is what points to here, this prototype guy. The other way of getting it is Object.getPrototypeOf, and then you put in this, or setPrototypeOf if you wanted to change it. So I'm going to do it this way, just to show you the alternate syntax. So the same way of doing this is this. So obj gets placed inside of here, Object.getPrototypeOf. So I'm talking about the prototype of this function right here. So this is the object that we're talking about. And here, if I try to call inner, that will fail. But I can do some method. That will work. That will fail, just like this fails. Okay, so let's comment those out. I'm going to show you another way of doing this. Just comment all those. There we go. All right, moving on to part number 2, the alternate way of doing this. Instead of doing this, a constructor function, which is going to create your object and then create this prototype, I want to talk about what happens if you just do this. If I say I'm going to create something called proto-obj. If I say that is going to be an object, and inside of it there's going to be a prop1, we'll say it's 456. Just like that, we can add inside of here some method okay. Now, this in itself looks like an object instance, and it is. Proto is an object. It's an instance of an object. So how do we get this? Well, doing this was the exact same thing as saying new object and then giving it the properties. So if I said let proto obj equal new object and then proto obj dot prop1 equals 456 proto obj dot some method equals function, and so on, just like that. This new object, this is the actual syntax. This is our constructor. Do you remember back up here? Let me clear that out and close this console for a moment so I can scroll this up. Right here, we called new to create it. That's the constructor function. This is the thing that creates the object instance and creates the prototype. And down here, we're doing the same thing. We're calling a constructor function to build our object, and it creates the prototype. So if we wanted to, we could do proto-obj dot prototype dot other method equals function, just like this, just like we did with the sum method up above. So we have a prototype on proto-obj. But this syntax isn't going to work because this is an instance. It's not a function. So we can't do this prototype. What we need to do to get to the prototype of an instance is what we did right here. The underscore proto. So we could do that. Or alternatively, we can say Object.getPrototypeOf, and then you put in proto-obj. Then you can say dot other method. Like that. Okay. So we do have a prototype here. When I do this, what I'm really doing is I'm saying, here's an instance, and the prototype of this is the object prototype. So I'm adding this onto the object prototype for this guy. Now, if I want to use this as a prototype to kind of stick it in the middle, we can do something similar to what we did above. We can say, let's declare a child object. Just keep it empty for the moment, just to keep this simple. And then what I want to build here is I want to say that child obj is going to point to proto-obj as its prototype, which is in turn going to point to the object prototype, which points to, as always, null. So I want to use, I've got my child object instance, I want to use proto-obj as its prototype. Because this was an instance, I had to use this property to get to its prototype, but I want to use that itself as my prototype here. So we can say Object.setPrototypeOf child obj, and we're going to use proto-obj as the prototype. So we are inserting this right here up above child, and that way child obj now has access to everything inside of here. We can say child obj dot prop1. Let's log that out. We can do child obj dot some method. We can do child obj dot other method. And what happens is we go up this prototype chain looking for other method, which is sitting up here. We're looking for some method, which is sitting right here. So we're here and we have this prototype chain that's built. We can crawl up the chain and use that. There we go. 4, 5, 6. That was prop 1. You can see there's nothing inside of child obj, but inside of prototype obj, that is what we've just set as our prototype right here, we have access to the 4, 5, 6 and the sum method and the other method. So because they're on our prototype chain, sitting somewhere along this chain, we have access to all these things, even though they're not defined specifically in here. Unlike a class-based object, where when you are creating a class and you're saying it extends some other class, what happens then is you copy everything down. So child obj would actually have copies of everything. If this were a class-based language, you would have copies of everything that's inside prototype obj and the object prototype. But we don't. We're a prototype, which means there's links created. We have this chain that we've built, and JavaScript is allowed to crawl up this chain looking to see, hey, do you have this property? Do you have this method? Do you have this property? Do you have this method? And it's not until it gets to this point where it says, okay, this is the end of the line. I could not find that property. So if I said child obj dot non-method, which doesn't exist anywhere in this prototype chain, that's when I get an error. There we go. Child obj non-method is not a function because it does not exist anywhere along this chain. Okay, now there's a newer syntax for doing what we just did here in number 3, this Object.setPrototypeOf. There's an alternate way of doing that, and that is with the Object.create method. So if I create a child obj2, I can say Object.create, and I'm going to use proto-obj as my prototype. So effectively, I've done these two lines together in a single line. That's what we're doing here. We're creating a blank object. I haven't defined any additional properties. So this is a blank object, and this is set as the prototype. Just those two lines combined, that's what we're doing right here. All right, so we do have child obj2, which is pointing to proto-obj as its prototype, which in turn is pointing to Object.prototype, which finally gets up to null. So that's our big long chain that we've got. And as always, we can access from child obj2 anything that is inside the chain, which means this prop1 up inside the prototype obj, we can access that. I'm just going to comment these out so we stop getting errors or anything. There we go. There's the 4, 5, 6. So this is coming from proto-obj. Now, the interesting thing about properties is if I now do this, if I do child obj2 dot prop1, because this told me 4, 5, 6, so it looks like I have a property called prop1 inside of child obj. But if I try and change the value, let's say to 777, and I console.log, I know I've got an extra C there, child obj2 dot prop1. If I write that out, I am going to get the 777, so I will get what you would expect. There's the 777. So what we've done here is we've actually created a new property inside child obj2 called prop1. We have not done anything to the original prop1. If we come back up here, prop1 inside of proto-obj, we haven't touched that at all. So this is where prop1 was. When we console logged that out, we were getting the value from here. By doing this, we're adding the property to here. So if I do this, and I also say, but what is the value inside my prototype, we'll be able to see both values coming up here. And you can see 777, that's the brand new one that's inside of child obj2, but there is still one up inside the proto-obj, which is 4, 5, 6. And the same idea applies to methods as well. You've got methods that can exist inside of here, or inside of here, or inside of here. Down at this level, if you just write the name of the method, JavaScript is going to go up the chain looking for that. When you add methods or change methods, what you're doing is you have to point at which one that you want to change. So inside of proto-obj, we had something called some method up here. I can add a brand new one down inside of child obj2. So child obj2 some method calls the one inside proto-obj. But if I do child obj2 dot some method, if I can type it, equals function we are actually creating a brand new some method sitting right here. This is where the method sits that we're going to call if I do child obj2 some method. But if I go child obj2 dot proto some method, then I'm going up that chain. I am actually crawling up the prototype chain, and you can see the last two lines here. This is the one that's inside of child object 2. This is the one that's up the prototype chain. But if this one didn't exist, what we're going to do is JavaScript will crawl up the chain looking to see if it can find it until it gets to the very end to this null. And if it hasn't found it by that point, that's when it gives up and gives us an error. All right, so a copy of this code is available down in the description as a link to a code gist. If you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the comments down below. I hope this helps you understand the prototype chain a little bit better and where things get placed and what's going on. Just remember, when you're using a function as a constructor, you're getting a prototype created for you. If you are just using this syntax, then the object prototype is what you're getting at the very beginning. It's like you're calling new object. You still get a prototype, but it's the object prototype that you're getting. And use the methods getPrototypeOf, setPrototypeOf to get or change the prototype, or the new syntax, which is right here, Object.create. That's probably the simplest and easiest way to do it. It's a great new method. All right, as always, thanks for watching.